Today we are going to discuss the third part of learning factors, which is motivation. Motivation, in order to understand, let's try to analyze a couple of definitions or perceptions or views of different researchers. According to Hall, a psychological construct. So motivation is a psychological construct that refers to the desire and incentive that an individual has to engage in a specific activity. So it's a psychological construct. What do we mean by psychological construct? It is something, a characteristic or a trait that cannot be observed directly, can be seen or can be observed in the form of abilities, emotions, and feelings. So it's a psychological construct or an ability or feelings or perception that a particular activity has for an individual in the form of any incentive or any desire. Then we have another perception or definition whereby motivation is something that provides the primary impetus to initiate second language learning and later the driving force to sustain the long and often tedious learning process. So this is again something which refers to the starting point of any task or activity. So impetus serves as an incentive or inspiration. Not only that, it also acts as a driving force which maintains the level of motivation throughout the performance of a particular activity and maintain that level of performance throughout a learning process which is otherwise a very tedious task. There are three views on motivation. We have behavioristic, cognitive, and constructivist views. With regard to the behavioristic view, we see that it is to do with the anticipation of reward, desire for positive reinforcement, external individual forces that actually control or which are in control. So anticipation of reward, you get into a process of developing a behavior or any learning task when you see that there is a certain reward attached to it. And then there's some positive reinforcement, maybe a pat on a shoulder, well done, good job. External individual forces, that external factors which are there, which act as reinforcing factors to keep the motivation intact. With regard to cognitive, they are the degree of, basically they are driven by human needs. Human needs can be in the form of desires, in the form of thinking, or something to do with your own perception or mental processes. Degree of efforts expend, the degree of efforts which are spent on a particular task, and then internal individual forces in control, your internal state of mind or your internal thoughts. They play an important part in terms of developing motivation. Constructivist views state that social context and your community and your social status, security of group, internal and interactive forces in control. So basically the society or the social surrounding around an individual play a very important part to trigger a motivation and then keep that motivation at pace in form of developing any learning or carrying out any task. Now you have Donne's process model of motivation image in front of you. It has three stages. You have the pre-actional, then you have actional, and then post-actional stage. The functions that are performed at pre-actional stage are forming intentions or lodging an action. The very intention-based stage where you are forming the intention to lodge a particular action. That action is basically influenced by the nature of the objectives of the task, the goals, value of the task, how valuable it is, how important it is, attitude of second language and its speakers, self-efficacy, that is one's own belief in one's ability to successfully accomplish a particular task, learner's belief and strategies, available support and obstacles. So these are the factors that influence as far as the motivation is concerned with regard to the pre-actional stage. At the actional stage, this is something which is the process of doing is observed, and the influencing factors are quality of learning experience, sense of autonomy which are there, teacher intervention, classroom reward, goal structure, other learners and self. So basically learners' own self-regulation with regard to experience, autonomy, and teachers' intervention. Then you have the post-actional stage, which means forming attributions, elaborating strategies for the plan. So attribution is the self-reflection or self-critique, finding reasons for errors of one's own as well as others' behavior. So this is attribution bias, self-confidence, self-worth, feedback, praise, grades. So these are the three stages which Doyne recommends as far as model of motivation is concerned. Doyne's model presents basically three stages: setting goal and getting started. This is first stage. The second is that how you keep the motivation intact during a performance or carrying out of a task. And the third is performance reflection, that after the end of a certain task, you reflect back and do the self-critique. Now we have this integrative motivation, which is defined as within the context of SLA as something that an individual desires to learn a language to integrate with speakers of the target language as well as for cultural enrichment. So integrative motivation is the motivation where the learners are involved in order to integrate themselves with the target language, culture, enrichment, and among the speakers. Then you have the instrumental motivation that includes all the external factors, which can be in the form of praising or passing an exam or financial rewards, or external factors that contribute towards the enhancement of motivation. Now these are again the two aspects, the two reasons which Gardner and Lambert has also identified: the integrative motive and the instrumental orientation that I have just explained. Now moving on to the model, Gardner's educational model is something that he started to develop as socio-educational model depicting the attitudes and motivation in second language learning in 1960s and has continued revising it. Now according to this model, you have the social milieu, which refers to individuals' cultural beliefs or environment, and it plays a role as influencing both affective as well as cognitive individual differences among language learners. Now the second variable is the individual differences. That includes 4 sub-variables, 2 cognitive and 2 affective. One is this intelligence. It's a determiner of how quick and how well the learner will acquire the language. Then you have language aptitude, verbal and cognitive abilities. Then you have motivation, that is how hard the learner will work to acquire the second language. Situational anxiety, which is seen as inhibiting effect on the learner's performance in acquiring second language. The third variable is the learning acquisition context, which actually refers to the setting where the language is being learned, the combination of formal training and informal language expressions. And the last, which is the fourth variable, that has to do with the linguistic and non-linguistic knowledge. When we say linguistic knowledge and language skills, we are talking about vocabulary knowledge, grammar, fluency, pronunciation. Non-linguistic, we are talking about something that's individuals' attitudes, values, beliefs, or cultural values of target language community. To conclude, the internal factor, intrinsic and integrative, encourage and facilitate the process of language achievement, and the external factor, which are the extrinsic and instrumental, influence this process with effective contributions.